a governor on the British Society of Cinematographers and former president. Our next interview is with a guy who in the film world needs no introduction, worked as the cinematographer on the film Monty, Serendipity, Quartet, Saving Grace, and won numerous awards. An old good friend of mine, Borman. Yeah, I'm going to just say long time no see. We sort of worked years ago together. Tell me about where you are now.
I'm in the Languedoc-Roussillon, which is Pyrénées-Orientales, it's called.
How long have you been there for?
Well, I was shooting in Budapest on a TV series, political thriller, with Czeki Cario in the lead, and called Baptiste, which has been on telly for a bit. And
when is that?
This year. So I started prepping in December and went there in January and started shooting 1st of February. And then and it was all going fine. And then suddenly this virus came, and the whole project was pulled at a cost, apparently, from the producer of £1 million, and then they had to send us all back.
Do you get a sense that anyone is working now around, or it's just completely shut down, the industry?
Well, no, it's completely shut down. Everything's shut down because it's impossible to work under confinement. Although some people have, Netflix apparently are doing something in Iceland, but they took the whole crew and isolated them for 2 weeks, and then also obviously Iceland is also an island, so it's slightly isolated anyway. Isolated for 2 weeks, and then so they started shooting an episode. I'm not quite sure what, but that's how they've done it. And other people are thinking of doing things. And, I'm a BSC member, British Society of Cinematographers member, and was the president of it. And now I'm a governor of it. And we, on a regular basis, every week, talk about how we could get going again, because nobody's working and we've got to figure out a way. And it could, unless we have a vaccine, be ages before we start working again. And how do we do it? How can we do it safely? I personally think it's going to be impossible. But, because filmmaking by nature is something which is quite intimate. You're close to your grip, you're close to your focus puller, you talk to each other for movement and for focus pulling, and by nature you're close, and you're also close to the actors. So any one of us fall ill and get the virus while we're shooting, then the whole production folds. So no insurance company will insure it, and the only people who are rich enough to do it and have to judge the risk element are people like Netflix, that are absolutely loaded and can afford possibly to take the risk, but nobody else.
So you think it's uninsurable right now, production?
Yeah.
I guess what I was curious about was just the you didn't plan, obviously, that you were going to be doing this, but I think you've been using the time to sort of recce or pre-produce or cast, look for locations for a film script of your own. Is that right?
Yes, I mean the idea of the film script was initiated 5-6 years ago, so well before the COVID. It's just that I'm a cinematographer. I've shot 40 odd movies and felt that it was time for me to challenge myself and direct. And as I'm living here in France, which is visually beautiful, I thought, well, and I speak fluent French. Well, let me think of a story that I could write and develop and make.
So tell me about this new film.
It's called The Bull, and it initially it started because I used to go to Barcelona a lot, and on the way to Barcelona, on the border town, is full of brothels and prostitutes on the road, and it's also a sort of truck stop where truckers stopped and spend the night there and sometimes the weekend there before driving again on a Monday. And I would go through there often, and it's extraordinary visual. It's lines upon lines of trucks with silhouetted little figures of women going from one truck to another, things like that, all in neon light and reflected floor in the neon light reflected in the sort of often wet floor and things like that. And that immediately, as I was just sitting there having supper, I wandered around and I just thought, well, this could be. I mean, obviously, I'm a cinematographer, so visually things strike me immediately. And then it was a question of actually, creating a story that would fit with the locations that I discover and found. And in this story and in this location, I thought, well, it's perfectly legal. The brothels are legal, and prostitution is legal in Spain, and but there's not much love. So I thought, well, as a springboard, as a starting point, let's try and find a story in which there's love in a place where there's no love, and that spinborn me into starting to work on characters, work on the different people that would be in this film.
And that was 6 years ago when you.
And that was 6 years ago. And I have a lot of friends in the Camargue who are gypsies, and they play extraordinary music. And I often go to their gypsy encampment, of which one was in Beauduc, but now has moved on. Was in Beauduc again, absolutely staggeringly beautiful. And then after that, I bumped into some matadors, one of which was a Chinaman, and the other one was a gypsy as well. And you're just meeting these people, listening to the music, and then and trying to work out a story that would make sense within the locations that I think are beautiful and emotive. I started thinking, and this is why the film is called The Bull, of an ex-matador who got skewered by a bull and then had to leave his passion and his profession and became a truck driver. And as a truck driver, he would go through the border town on a regular basis. And one night, he saved these young prostitutes from being violated by a gang leader. And that's basically, and then a love story. Then a love story starts from that premise. And they're both outcasts. They're both troubled people, and we discover what his troubles are. And it's just a film about how he finds himself after he's been skewered by the bull and lost his profession and his passion, how he refines his strength. And through this girl and through us discovering, and I won't tell you what it is, otherwise it would spoil it. He dies to save her, but in dying, in this tragedy, he saves himself. And that's the principle of the story. All surrounded by the gypsy music and the gypsy culture, the gangland culture of the border town and the brothels. and
And
those two characters really.
this is the first film you're going to direct, the first feature?
Yes. This is the
Okay.
first one. Yeah. I just, 42
Any particular
movies.
reason why now? Just the
Well, because
lockdown,
I've
everything came
done
together.
well. The lockdown helps, I suppose. But also, no, I come from an art school, where I was a sculptor beforehand, and I paint, and I take a lot of photographs, and I've done cinematography all my life. And there comes a point when you just need to challenge yourself. There's a point where you just say to yourself, "What's my next challenge? What would I really love to do next?"
Right.
And I'm working more and more, not always, but often with first-time directors, where I'm helping them more than but maybe I have a bit more knowledge than they do. And I just think, well, okay,
Why
I don't
not?
mind doing that, and I love doing it, but at the same time, I quite like to do it because, I'm,
I know. It
you know,
happens with editors too.
yeah.
For a while. So. Well, look, I think it sounds fantastic, and I think you'd be a great director. You seem very comfortable on set. Some people are not happy being in the middle of everything, but you have all of that.
No, I'm very confident. And also, I pre-visualize, like I do any film, pre-visualized it, and it's just a question of the pacing and the characters and the character development and the handling of the actors
Wow.
that need to be done, in the most sensitive way. But I feel confident of that because I've
Yeah.
always got on very well with the actors on all sets. I did a film called Last Chance Harvey with Dustin Hoffman, and we became best mates by the end of it. And then I said to him, because I wanted a job, I said, "Why don't you start directing?" He said, "Get me a script, John." And then I did a film called An Education. The producer had a script, and I think Richard Longcrane was meant to direct it, but then he pulled out. And it was about with Maggie Smith
Wow.
and Tom Courtenay and a whole bunch of really well-known actors of a certain age.
Uh-huh.
And she said, "Do you want to give it to Dustin?" And I was really good mate with Dustin. We used to go out a lot together. And so I gave it to him on the way back to Los Angeles. Say, "Read this. I think it's perfect. It's with the best actors we have of a certain age group. You'd be the best director for this." He read it on the plane, and as he landed, he phoned me up. He said, "I want to do this, John," and we did. A year later, we were shooting a
What?
film called Quartet.
What? Well, you said? Did you say you were grading on your last film over Zoom? Is that right?
Well, yeah, because I'm stuck here, and the grading was happening in Dublin,
Okay.
so it was sort of impossible to leave here. And this was a true confinement at that point, where you couldn't leave your house. And the director, Barnaby Thompson, desperately wanted to get it finished and start selling it.
Right.
So I had no option. I said, "Well, okay, well, let's figure out a way." And then the editor, was a real boffin, said, "Well, look, what we can do, I could do a Zoom with you, and then I could quick time you the images I'm doing, and as I'm grading, you'll be able to see what I'm grading. And if you have an iPad, a brand new iPad, which I do,
Hmm.
it won't be that dissimilar. You'll get a good idea." And as we were doing it, I could see that he was right. It was, obviously it's not as good as seeing it on a 30-foot screen,
Sure.
but you could get the coloring right, and you could get the gamma and the contrast, and you could get quite a lot right. And
Okay.
then I said to the director, "You have to promise me that before we officially send it out, that I see it on a big screen and tweak anything that we might have got wrong because we did it on small screens."
What is that
Uh,
film called?
it's called Pixie,
Okay. Is it
shot
comedy
last
or?
summer.
Okay. And that's
With
coming out.
Alec Baldwin in it and stuff, and young
Okay.
kid. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why I'm sitting here and writing my script and working on my project, so that when things loosen up, I've got something to offer, and it's there, and it's ready, and I've done everything I can to make it ready. And that's what Netflix are doing. That's what a lot of producers, my producer in Los Angeles, he says he's never been so busy. He's
Oh,
constantly
really?
talking. But he's making deals with everybody. You know, he's making deals and he's working on the script. He's getting them all absolutely perfect,
Right.
and getting the package together and getting the director to sign up for everything, and everybody's
Right.
primed and ready to go when it's possible.
Boom. So
Because
presumably
everybody's
when
going
it
to need, they're going to need films. They're going to need films soon. Because everybody will have seen everything they've shot.
and absolutely. And what about presumably it'll just like explode out of the gate once it's some sort of vaccines there or whatever. I have a dry question because we know each other, but would you call yourself, is there a style, are you a stylist or a naturalist? Do you go for more like the
Well, I think more of a naturalist, I would say. I try not
person?
to. I try to
Okay.
make films that lend that sort of balances the story as opposed to show off. I'm not a show off cinematographer. I'm one that tries to en- enhance and make the emotion visual in most things that I do. I try not to.
Okay. You're looking more at the characters and what's happening and
Yeah, so that and then that's like any image making situation. An image is not a representation of what's in front of you. It's a representation of the emotion of what's in front of you. So that you've got
but
a lonely figure, you find a way to frame it and give the image that
I know.
enhances the
Right.
fact that they're very lonely.
But for something like Blade Runner, which is incredible design, I think the shooting is good. Some of those, it's incredibly stylish, or do you not feel it's a very emotional film, or not very real film?
No, I think it's an amazing film. It's an amazing film, and I think no, in many parts is pretty emotional.
Yeah, it is.
About that woman that's a robot and he loves her and all that stuff. And but I suppose the visual aspects is the thing that really strikes out as being extraordinary.
They
It was
just
so ahead of its
dog
time.
it.
And you go to Hong Kong now; it's not that dissimilar to Blade Runner. All these
Right.
neon signs everywhere and things like that in Hong Kong
Apparently, it
look
was a
like,
very difficult shoot, but it was worth it. I swear, that's a great film.
yeah,
Can I
incredible.
ask you about digital? And I think I was reading about a film you made, Shall I Stay, or something like that? The
If I
first
stay,
digital, If I Stay. How
yeah.
was that trend? Because I can imagine you being someone who really does, being as you do, you kind of, I think you follow the person. So, and that is how you like to tell a story. How was that? I can imagine you were very resistant to lose film. Was that a good experience for you?
Yeah. Well, yeah. 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 No, it was. I mean, the
The
different
digital aspect
you
of it.
can do. Especially nowadays. When you and I, you were one of the first people that adored digital, but the digital sensor was so tiny that everything was in focus. The background, the foreground, fucking everything was in focus. So the images were really ugly, and also the latitude was so small, so that if you had a window in the background, it became completely overblown and overexposed.
Right, right.
That is not the case anymore. The latitude is ginormous, as much, virtually as much, I think, as much as film,
Hmm.
and the colouring is extraordinary. And actually, in many ways, you get better blacks. Whereas when you were on film, to get a proper black, you had to overlight the film a bit and then crush it down to get the black. Otherwise,
Right.
you just get grain in black. So unless,
Right.
and there are a few films I have done where I wanted grain, so I would work for that. But unless you want grain, you had to slightly overlight it and then crush it. Now,
Mm.
blacks in video, you just don't light it, and it's pure black and actually pitch black, and it's beautiful.
Right.
So there's that in digital, which you can't get on film. But undoubtedly, portraiture is more beautiful on film than it is on digital. And if somebody's got a rough skin and things like that, you have to really work much harder to
Wow.
make
Okay.
them look better because it's so sharp. That's the thing. So that's why we're all now using lenses from the 1950s. K35 Canons and Cook.
That was my next question. So you have you must have things to offset that and lenses you just love or go to.
Yeah. I like K35, the Canon ones. They flare absolutely beautifully. They're soft but irregular and slightly unusual. They're not as sharp all the way round. They're not sharp, but they
Mm.
have a certain softness, and the depth of field is very small. You can open them right up to 1.4 or something, and then
Mm.
so that one eye would be in focus, the other one won't. So if you wanted that, you could get that. And they're beautiful. They're old-fashioned, and they
Mm.
were made by hand, so that
Such a
they're
nice
not
mix.
perfect. They're not perfect. And the
Right.
S2 Cook lenses are the same. They're not
Right.
perfect, and I think every cinematographer nowadays um, prefers something that has character, of which
Right.
these lenses do.
What
And
about photographers? Like, who are the ones that you loved? Anyone influence you a lot, or
well, over the years, yeah, I mean, many.
because I
Um,
think photographers make great DPs or lighting cameramen, much better than video cameramen.
oh, okay. I don't know who you're thinking of.
I'm just thinking of the guys we worked with.
Oh, okay.
I always I don't know. I mean, there was you, but there was, I can't remember, Jean Pierre, or there was another guy, and there's a couple of friends. But always people who like to shoot camera. They're looking at it different. They're looking at light, basically. So I
Yeah.
always think,
I mean, the thing is with photographers is that, and this is what I talk about on a regular basis, is the image that you shoot. And I think that as a cinematographer, you have to think in the same way, is whereas a stills photographer has to shoot an image that is 1/100th of a second, and within that image, it
mm,
evokes so much more than what's in front of the camera. It evokes emotion. It evokes things.
mm,
You get the Vietnam war photographs. That young girl who's running away
running from the
from
napalm.
from the thing from what's it, McCullen. Uh, I mean,
Mm,
it says so much in that 100th of a second. It talks about war. It talks about survival. It talks about so many things, and it's done in an instant. And actually,
right.
in many ways, one should think like that even when you do films on film, on video. You try and take a photograph, to take a shot in which it says more than what's in front of you. And I did
Mm,
that, I think, on an education where the young girl, Kerry Mulligan, is starting to fall in love with this man, and she can't. He's much older than her. It's a true story. Much older than her, and he's driving her in his. I can't remember what car it was, but it was like a Riley or something, and and he stops and he goes across the road to meet these black Trinidadians who he talks to, and obviously brings them into a flat. And what they used to do in the 60s is they'd get these, they'd buy these flats, and then put black people. I mean, it's awful, but put black people in them so that all the inhabitants in the same block would leave because they didn't want to live around with black people. And then they would buy those flats, and then that's how they got rid of the people who owned the flats below and above and things like that. Awful, awful. But in this scene, she's discovering who this guy is, and this is not implied in the film. So you just take we took images of them arriving, and then stayed on her face. And her face, she's looking through the side window. And in the side window is the reflections of the black people. And it was just pulling the focus from her face to what she's thinking of, to what she's looking at, and the reflection of what she's looking at. And that was such a simple way of expressing an emotion, reflectively and literally reflectively.
Right.
And that's what you need to do in any form of filmmaking.
Great.
You would need to find a way of describing an emotion in a different way.
What about virtual can? I mean, this must have hugely, how long you work to make a film, you get it ready, you sell the house or whatever, or, you get your first big production deal or whatever it is. And then this happens and there's no can. Everything is built around a can release. It must have just really destroyed a lot of people's window to market their film.
Yeah.
Have you heard about virtual can?
Well, the BAFTA's doing the same thing. There's going to be a BAFTA this year or next year, and it's all going to be virtual. It's all going to be, you'll be, I don't know how they are going to organize it. So presumably they'll have to open the envelope, and the prospective finalists will be all in front of their computers, and make a speech that way. I don't know how it's going to happen. I mean, they'll have to be invented.
I was just curious that some of these things, like you grading on Zoom, or some of these things will stay. So maybe we'll have a virtual can, which should, for some people is probably less expensive than getting a ticket there. I'm sure it'll come back. But I was just curious about what will.
Yeah,
can will come back.
The whole point of festivals is to show off your actors and your stars and give the glamour to the whole film game. And you cut that out, then you lose so much, really. You lose so much of the fun of it, apart from anything else. And everybody loves it.
Right. Do you like it? When did you last go?
Well, no, I used to go to Cannes quite often. I went to Sundance. I had 3 films at Sundance one year, all on the same year. And
which ones?
Saving Grace, New Year's Day, and I think Hamlet. Wow, and okay. Saving Grace 1, and
because I think I was editing in New York, and wow, what was I doing? I think I went to one of the piers, and the film Monty was on.
Oh, really?
And I watched it with my fiancée, then wife. I married. She was, I don't know, a coordinator of the production company, later producer. But we saw the film Monty on this huge screen on the pier. And then I saw your credit at the end of it, and I was like, bloody hell.
You know me.
Very cool. I jumped up and said, I know him. No, I didn't. But, it was a great place to see it. It was a really entertaining, really cool film.
Well, to this day, actually, I mean, I have to say, it's probably not my most visual film, but in terms of humanity, in terms of its sensitivity and how well it was written made it so successful. I'll never forget that people in France got up and clapped at the end of it. My sister was here in France, and yet, you know, it's a completely different culture. Sheffield and North Yorkshire and Yorkshire is a different thing. But because all the characters were recognisable in any culture, that made it so successful. Sam Shepard came up to me when I was doing Hamlet, and he said, "Jan, the great thing about the film Monty is that every single one of those characters lives in my town."